convert your children. Someone's gotta teach them not to hate. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them.
Yeah, how about no? Welcome back, friends, to The Study. This episode is brought to you by the Department of. So many of y'all are years late in expressing discontent for Elon Musk. And the only reason, literally the only reason most people these days have decided to jump aboard the Elon Musk sucks train is because he decided, after being rejected by leftists in the Democratic Party, much like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., to go work on Team Trump. And we all know, unless your opinion of Trump and everybody who doesn't speak 100% ill of him is ick, you're a racist, homophobic, transphobic Nazi who wants to destroy democracy and jerk off dictators to climax with the Trump dance. Now, I, for one, have been stating since I began volunteering for the Venus Project that, compared to its founder Jacques Fresco, that Elon Musk is nothing more than a brilliant idiot who builds fancy toys for profit that do little for the betterment of humanity. And my opinion, which of course is the correct one, was confirmed after listening to Musk on his first appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, where he was open and honest about many things he's done, including, but not limited to, building a flamethrower for sale, which he told people not to buy, but made available for purchase anyways, which makes perfect sense, that was inspired by the movie Spaceballs. And as we all know, most creative and humanitarian ideas that the great minds of our time bring forth into existence are in fact inspired by the Mel Brooks classic Spaceballs.
You know that. Of course I do, sir. Everybody knows that. Of course we do, sir.
See, I remember being at a Halloween horror movie party hosted by my brother Too Many in like 2016, 2017-ish, where I shared bits about my volunteer efforts for the Venus Project and brought up the fact that, compared to Jacques Fresco, Elon Musk is nothing more than a brilliant idiot. And this comment offended, like on a deep and personal level, a friend of ours who became visibly agitated and hurt by my words as if he were on the receiving end of a cunt punt. It was both pretty weird and unexpected, but I meant what I said and I didn't apologize for it or rephrase my opinion to repair the wound to his vagina. And although my volunteer work for the Venus Project came to an end not long after its founder Jacques Fresco died at age 101, my feelings about the issue remain unchanged, and it's loony but not surprising to me that the very same people who kissed Elon's dick for building rockets and self-driving cars, which Jacques Fresco talked about long before his 1974 interview on the Larry King Show, uncupped their hands from Musk's balls the moment they learned he was joining the MAGA movement to Doge America. Y'all are corny, y'all are simple, y'all are mad late, and you've been called out. But me, I've been calling a spade, and very publicly, so publicly that I even upset conservative podcaster for the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh, who had this to say about my feelings towards Musk.
Finally, Evadense says going to Mars is literally the dumbest and most pointless human venture ever. Elon Musk makes fancy toys that do nothing for humanity. I think I've already addressed this. You're really trying to bait me into. I will give the whole speech again. I don't care how late the show is going. I'll do another 10 minutes on it. I would, but I won't here. All I'll say is, okay, so Elon Musk is not doing anything for humanity. Unlike you, right? What are you doing exactly? If you want to know what doing nothing for humanity looks like, then you can look in the mirror. That's what just like existing and doing nothing and contributing nothing looks like. Building rocket ships to go into outer space. I don't care why you're going out. I don't care where you're going in outer space. You have already done infinitely more for humanity than you have done. Evadense.
Which I'm not upset about, because being a middle child, a man, and a performer for many years, I, unlike many people, can actually take criticism, no matter how private or public. Now, unfortunately, I have to point out the fact that Matt Walsh failed to read my comment correctly and completely. My comment actually reads, quote, "Going to Mars is literally the dumbest and most pointless human venture ever. Elon Musk is a brilliant idiot who makes fancy toys that do nothing to better the world. Compared to Jacques Fresco, Elon is a joke, end quote. See, had he read the whole comment, his listeners would have Googled Jacques Fresco, found out who he is, learned what the Venus Project is, and discovered that my opinion, as usual, is the correct one, and that might make Matt Walsh look a little silly for stating nonsense like the fact that he doesn't care why we're venturing into space or to Mars, because the reason absolutely matters. And don't worry, Matt, we're still cool, even though you did not in fact read my comment the way I served it. But that is why you, Matt Walsh, are today canceled. Godspeed. And now on to episode 25. Speaking as a loving husband, a father, a teacher and mentor, and a concerned citizen who loves his country and his planet, I have nothing but compassion for people in pain who are suffering unnecessarily. My heart breaks for people who are medically and clinically ill, sexually confused for whatever reason, whether it's due to negligent parenting from an Oedipal or devouring mother, an absent or tyrannical father, a combination of both, people who are poorly socialized, people who are genuinely lonely and in need of connection with others, and especially those who have suffered and experienced emotional, psychological, physical, and or sexual abuse, whether as children or adults. These people need the help they deserve and should be listened to and understood, same as all people in pain. However, what no one in pain needs is a blank check of unlimited credit for bad behavior and lack of accountability. People in pain also don't deserve to be shamed, insulted, or made to feel guilty for being in pain or for what they went through and experienced that caused them pain or trauma. We all need to understand that suffering can spread and hurt more people than it needs to if not properly dealt with. And properly dealing with something doesn't mean ignoring it, never talking about it, suffering alone and in silence, and never seeking professional help. Quite the contrary. Any pain that could and should be dealt with and is not is no different than a fire not put out before it spreads. It'll only cause further catastrophe until dealt with effectively. There's this quote from Avengers Age of Ultron just before the team assembles for the big battle in Sokovia, where Vision is sharing his thoughts about the need to stop Ultron while expressing compassion for him. He says, "I don't want to kill Ultron. He is unique and he is in pain. But that pain will roll over the earth, so he must be destroyed." And before anybody clips this and tries to take it out of context, in this case, of course, it's not the people possessed by a sick and destructive ideology that must be destroyed, obviously. It's the ideology that needs to go. A similar sentiment is expressed in the 2019 Joker movie, where one man's pain is not dealt with properly or with any compassion and eventually sets fire to a whole city. Pain is unavoidable. We all suffer in so many ways. However, our pain can be handled generally in one of two ways. The first being that we experience pain and trauma and decide that we never want anyone else to go through what we went through and work to protect others from experiencing things we wish we didn't go through. And the other being we experience pain and trauma and decide that because we suffered, everyone else must suffer with us, maybe even worse than we did. I see people suffering from gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia as people in pain and in need of help. And I don't intend to ever look down on people for things they have no control over and can't change even if they wanted to. I want the best for people and their families, always have and always will. Pride, as it is used today, and all things that are associated with the topic, despite my deepest wishes as someone who would like to see a stable society of mentally and physically healthy men, women, and children, safe from harm, predators, and degenerates, will probably never ever go away. And I've put off this episode since a little before June of 2023 and was even hoping not to have to go through with it at all. But sadly, the insanity has not only continued, it's gotten worse, much worse. Now, there is way too much about this topic to cover all in one episode, and the asylum-worthy headlines and stories just keep rolling through like a never-ending avalanche of bad news for Team Sanity and human progress. Pride is a topic that is literally impossible to keep up with all the way without dedicating hours per week to it, and I've got too much shit going on in my life to do that. So instead, I'm going to do the episode that I intended to do back in June of 2023 with minimal updates since then. Some of the things that I will not be covering in this video, but you should look into anyways, are, for example, the scandal at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center's pediatric clinic in Tennessee, Dr. Miriam Grossman and her book titled Lost in Transnation, A Child Psychiatrist's Guide Out of the Madness, Helen Joyce and her book Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality, Riley Gaines and her book Swimming Against the Current, Fighting for Common Sense in a World That's Lost Its Mind, and the pro-woman, child safeguarding, anti-bullshit news and media website Redux. Now, going back to the video I played in the intro, whether or not you've come across that creepy ass "We're Coming for Your Kids" choir from a while back on your YouTube or social media feed, you definitely understand what happens in nature when one animal comes after or is even perceived to be coming after another animal's kids. Whether it's mama bear or papa bear, it is not a good idea to come for baby bear. And it's an even worse idea to announce that you're coming for them. In martial arts and combat sports, we call that telegraphing your attack, which is the easiest way to ensure that your attack fails. And to be clear, before we go any further, that is the frame of reference that I'll be coming from during this episode. I will be speaking as a concerned husband, father of a son, father of a daughter, teacher and mentor to many others, an overall protective citizen of this country and of this world who will not only call out harmful insanity when detected, but also stand firmly against it for the protection of men, women, and children. Now, I've got way too much to get to with this episode as it is, and have put it off long enough, so we're going to keep it moving along with the video by Nick Freitas, how you pronounce it? Freitas, that responds to the creepos and the weirdos of the We're Coming for Your Kids choir very nicely.
So somebody sent me this clip of people at a Pride March shouting out, "We're here, we're queer, and we're coming for your children." Of course, when they were called out on this, they just said, "Hey, it's a joke, it's mockery," you know, kind of like the gay men's choir in San Francisco who said the exact same thing. So I get it. You guys like jokes. I've got one for you. Once upon a time, there was a bunch of people that threatened to mess with other people's children, and then when they tried to make good on the attempt, they were brutally mauled beyond recognition by a father who identified as a grizzly bear. See, it's funny because it would be true.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Also, jail. Immediately jail. Now look, speaking of pride, I've got nothing against being proud of accomplishments and achievements. Definitely do celebrate yourself and pat yourself on the back whenever you scratch something off the big to-do list. However, I've been against pride, particularly false and nonsensical pride, since I was about 14 and didn't even understand what things like political or ideological affiliation meant. I was hardcore against it from the moment I noticed my own people buying into it via those stupid ass brown pride and West Coast Latino shirts and attire back in high school in the early 90s. Those Latinos that did buy into it basically told me that if I'm not dressing the part and sticking to the narrative of Latinos above all, that I'm not with them, and therefore insufficient because I didn't wave the flag, because I didn't say the lines. I was mocked, ridiculed, and punished for knowing well enough, even as an entire dumbass teen, to put my individual identity above the group. And speaking of radical stupidity and Latino insanity that is ego-driven false pride, I remember a very unpleasant experience when I was about 16 with a fellow Latino who insinuated that I was some sort of race traitor because Crazy Bone was my favorite Bone Thugs member and not Busy Bone. I thought it was pretty funny at the time that he didn't even know or care to know that Busy isn't even Latino in any way, shape, or form. He's actually half black and half Italian on his mother's side. All that he politely demanded is that the light-skinned member of Bone Thugs be my preferred member or else. I even remember his reasoning for why Busy was his favorite member and not Crazy or any of the other three. 'Cause I'm not a nigger. Brown pride, bitch. And while I immediately forgave the stupidity and didn't let it bother me too much, I will never forget those words. I've even been against pride since before I was a teenager. As a child, I endured many a family sessions of "let me tell you what to think," starring whatever it was my Bolivian family decided that Bolivians do better and did before the rest of the world, and anyone who claims otherwise, or else. One particular example being an aunt of mine during a discussion about something as innocent as pizza, declaring that Bolivia has the best pizza in the world, to which little old me replied, and I'm paraphrasing here because obviously I don't remember my exact words as a kid, "You haven't even tried pizza from anywhere but Bolivia and the United States. How can you possibly know this?" To which her only response was an enraged glare at my audacity to point out the obvious flaw in her bullshit. Now, as many of you may know, I'm what you might call a die-hard George Carlin fan, for lack of better words, and George famously had this to say about any kind of pride not related to accomplishments and or achievements.
Because to me, pride should be reserved for something you achieve or attain on your own, not something that happens by accident of birth.
I agreed with it back then when it was first said, and I agree with it now just as much. Also, to be perfectly clear, pride no longer means gay pride, unfortunately. This term has long since been hijacked by the alphabet activists to mean anything and everything under the so-called umbrella of terms most commonly known as LGBTQIA plus XYZ left right BA select start. And by the way, no one anywhere is LGBTQ. These letters all mean very different things, and each of these groups, except the very confused T's, understand that men are men and women are women. My fellow L's, G's, and B's were all fine with letting gays be gay, and that's awesome. Then, 15 seconds ago, the radical T's and their radical allies, so-called, put a loaded rainbow gun against everyone's head and demanded we all agree with them and think as they do, or be canceled on every level imaginable. And speaking of make-believe words and bullshit concepts that aren't actually a thing, no one is queer because no one can be a thing that can't be clearly defined. Besides, the word queer already had a clear definition. It has for a long time. It's a word that hateful and ignorant people used to express their ignorance and hatred and intolerance for gays. Also, no one is cis or cisgender because the words man, woman, male, female already have clear definitions and don't need new words invented by radical activist ideologues that do nothing but create confusion where it need not be. And no one anywhere is non-binary. No one can be non-binary even if people claim to be. And that's because no person is neither male or female. They are one or the other. And not to offend or hurt anyone, but no one is actually trans because no male can actually transition to female and no female can actually transition to male. No XX person can become XY and no XY person can become XX. Men are men and women are women, and that's literally all there is to it. No amount of surgical or chemical mutilation and disfiguration can or ever will change the fact that all people belong to one of two variations of a very binary species. This also goes for every member of the animal kingdom since the beginning of their existence. Many people, particularly young people, will say and do just about anything trendy and buzzworthy in order to receive attention and validation. Even untrue things that make no sense and are easily debunked by 2 seconds of critical thinking and mild questioning. The only sensible and meaningful kind of pride is the kind associated with accomplishment of work that took time and effort. However, the rainbow kind of pride is anti-truth, anti-conversation, anti-disagreement, and these days, yes, even anti-gay. It's anti-gay because it tells gay people in attempts to convince them, no, you're not really gay, you're actually trans, or you're not really gay, you're actually non-binary. And we've already established that trans and non-binary aren't real things. And with all this discussion about acceptance, authenticity, letting people be their authentic selves, someone should tell the alphabet mafia that allowing people to accept their authentic self is allowing boys to be boys, allowing girls to be girls, and allowing gays to be gay. And I'm not a biologist, but I know that biology is real, and so is truth. And the truth is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with being gay, and only a sick person would tell a gay person to deny their authentic gayness and try to confuse them into believing that they were somehow born in the wrong body, which of course no one is and no one can be. Because being born in the wrong body is impossible and also not a thing. Lies are not okay, and of course everyone lies. We lie most frequently when we're asked, "How you doing?" And we respond with, "I'm good," or "I'm fine." So I'm not suggesting that good people never lie, and I'm also not suggesting that telling small lies like I'm fine makes us bad people. We do lie, but we also agree that to be dishonest and maliciously deceptive is not okay. And the more serious the lie, the more serious the harm, the more serious the correction for that lie needs to be. And on that note, it's story time.
Input, Treasure Island, origin of the species, everything you always wanted to know about sex.
A friend of mine once told me a story about how some people were following her and her young sisters, I believe, with potentially dangerous motives, and she and her sisters were without adult protection. They were out by themselves. So, in a brilliant act of quick thinking motivated by desperation, she calls out to a random man nearby and shouts, "Dad! Dad!" and runs to him, at which point those chasing her stopped pursuing and the situation was de-escalated. Now this man was of course not her dad, but a means to an end. She and her sisters were safe and crisis was averted. And this is precisely what Bruce Lee was talking about in Enter the Dragon when he referred to his style as the art of fighting without fighting. Things are very often not so simple, and there are obviously exceptions to every rule, but the exception is always and only the exception, never the rule. The rule is the rule. Now, before we play a game of Spot the Lie, I want to play a short clip from Chris Rock's Netflix special called Selective Outrage that helps set up the game. Check this out.
What would make white men think they losing the country? What? What, because there's no more white couples in commercials? There's no black couples either. Every commercial has a mixed race couple. Everything.
He is, of course, absolutely right that there is a very noticeable and very forced decline in the amount of same-race couples in media versus mixed race. It's just an observation that he and many others, including you, have made on a thing that we're not responsible for and didn't ask for, but are being force-fed by our media anyways and have to now notice and can't unnotice. And noticing things is, of course, not a crime or something that can't be tolerated. No need to get triggered by simple observations without feeling emotionally damaged, right?
Emotional damage.
Okay, now on to the game. I'm going to show you a still from a book titled Find Out About Families that is targeted towards children, which I found at my local grocery store, which shall not be named. Let's see if you can spot the lie. Ready? Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Did you spot the lie? If not, let's break it down. See, I'm all for naturally occurring diversity and representation rooted in choice and merit. In fact, one of the books I bought for our daughter a long time ago is all about representation because I needed both our kids to understand that there are very different types of families and that it's fine and that most people have accepted it. The book by DC Comics is called Family is a Superpower, and of course I recommend it, and I wouldn't have bought it and allowed it in our home otherwise. However, to declare untruths as well as attempt to rewrite basic biology and create confusion where it doesn't need to exist is harmful, unhelpful, and counterproductive. And in case you didn't spot the lie, the family tree in the book is actually an example of the lengths that people will go to in order to create confusion in a child's mind very early on. And it's painfully difficult to process the fact that there are people out there with kids that would tell these kinds of lies to them. The truth is that while two women can raise a child together, they cannot and did not create little Owen. He didn't come from two women. He came from one woman and one man, whether by normal sexual reproduction or IVF. Little Owen has only one mother and one father, same as all kids raised by a same-sex couple. And great for Owen that he has people who love him and will be there for him. But a lie is still a lie, and let's not confuse education and facts with indoctrination and lies. Again, I'm just pointing out that ancestry and family lineage works the way it works. Also, it's not difficult to spot the out with the old, in with the new, mixed race couple or nothing agenda that Chris Rock referred to hard at work in the illustration here. Again, my concern over all these lies is that they're harmful to men, harmful to women, and especially harmful to children. And they are. But don't take my word for anything. I invite you to take a look at a few polls that came my way. Polls that came my way. That sounded really gross. Polls that came my way taken by an organization called McLaughlin and Associates, a national survey, research, and strategic service company. These polls regarding the topic of this country's actual feelings towards transgenderism and gender ideology were published in April of 2022. Feel free to screenshot these. As far as I can tell, this survey shows what the majority of Americans think, and if anyone out there has more accurate numbers, I invite them to drop a link in the comments. This is a public space and I don't block people for sharing information, only for being unproductive and noisy dickweeds. Now, before I play a few clips from an episode of Real Time with Bill Maher to lighten up the mood a little, I want to play 2 other clips from a couple of women I came across on TikTok speaking on the trans phenomenon, who are armed with something that is increasingly rare these days: common sense. And I apologize for not being able to name these women, but for the sake of truth and logic, the points are too important to leave out of this episode.
Trans rights advocates say children know who they are. I just think, have you ever raised a child? Diane Ehrensaft says that if an 18-month-old girl pulls a barrette out of her hair, she's sending a gender message. She's trying to tell you that she's not really a girl. And I think, have you ever been around a child? When my son was 18 months old, every time we'd get in the car, he'd pull his shoes off and throw them. What did that mean? What was he trying to tell us? That he really should be an amputee because he doesn't want to have feet? Ridiculous.
We are not doing this because we're anti-transgender. We're doing this because we don't believe there is such a thing as transgender. We believe that there are children who have been victimized, who are suffering, who are traumatized, who have adopted a transgender identity as a coping mechanism, and we care deeply about them. And we don't want them medicalized, and we don't want them to believe that they're inherently flawed. It isn't in any way loving to tell a child that they should become somebody else because who they are isn't okay.
It shouldn't be taboo to call a lie, or to say that a man can't become a woman and a woman can't become a man. It shouldn't be risky to state that no one anywhere has actually transitioned to the opposite gender. And it shouldn't be a potentially career-ending move to say that mentally ill people need real help and real compassion, not immediate affirmation by propagandists that would manipulate and use them for personal gain, brownie points, profit, and experimentation. It also shouldn't be triggering to say that social contagions are real and that people, especially young people, partake in trends simply for the attention and validation it brings. And this trans insanity is absolutely a social contagion because despite the activists claiming that so-called trans people have existed forever but have only now been able to come forward, there are approximately 0 self-identifying trans people from generations prior to this one coming out and stating that they've been waiting decades to do so. There are also no records of any spikes in suicidality, which the activists will tell you is common among those claiming trans identities, among demographics of people supposedly trapped in the trans closet for decades before this one. Even people with a mediocre understanding of recent history can recall similar phenomena over the years, such as cutting, bulimia, and anorexia affecting the same demographics over and over again. And it shouldn't be a career-ending risk to point out the similarities or to recognize and point out the potential danger of such phenomena to men, women, and especially children. We should at least not be shut down for having the discussion of the dangers of pride and the LGBTQ social contagion running rampant and out of control. In fact, it's never been more important to state the obvious than to speak out against all the harm being done here to modern culture by this insanity. In one of his New Rules segments, Bill Maher put it this way.
New rule: if something about the human race is changing at a previously unprecedented rate, we have to at least discuss it. According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z. Which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054. The ACLU recently tweeted a list of those who would be disproportionately harmed by this. You would think women might top that list? No, wasn't even on the list. Second on the list was LGBT. Really? Someone needs to say it. Not everything's about you. And it's okay to ask questions about something that's very new and involves children. The answer can't always be that anyone from a marginalized community is automatically right, trump card, mic drop, end of discussion. Because we're literally experimenting on children. We do know it hinders the development of bone density, which is kind of important if you like having a skeleton. Weighing trade-offs is not bigotry. Yet when a book questioning the sudden uptick in transitioning children was released, a trans lawyer with the ACLU named Chase Strangio tweeted, "Stopping the circulation of this book and these ideas is 100% a hill I will die on." How very civil liberties of him. Yes, part of the rise in LGBT numbers is from people feeling free enough to tell it to a pollster, and that's all to the good. But some of it is, it's trendy. If this spike in trans children is all natural, why is it regional? If we can't admit that in certain enclaves there is some level of trendiness to the idea of being anything other than straight, then this is not a serious science-based discussion. It's a blow being struck in the culture wars using children as cannon fodder. And never forget, children are impressionable and very, very stupid. Maybe childhood makes you sad sometimes, and there are other solutions besides hand me the dick saw.
And Bill Maher is about as centered, moderate, and old school as a liberal can be these days. I don't agree with all his views or everything he says, but he frequently invites people with very different points of view to discuss difficult topics. Something that Democracy Now! Used to do via roundtable discussions, which all came to a screeching halt right around the time Donald Trump became president in 2016 and Trump derangement syndrome, or TDS, took hold of this country. And speaking of Democracy Now!, here's a clip from an episode that aired May 30th, 2022. The segment is titled Chase Strangio, Alabama Ban on Trans Youth Healthcare is Part of Wider GOP Attacks on Bodily Autonomy. In this clip, former journalist and present-day propagandist Amy Goodman talks with a woman identified as Chase Strangio, who was referenced earlier in the Bill Maher clip, about the 2022 decision in Alabama to protect physically healthy and mentally confused youth from unnecessary, harmful, and likely permanent damage by way of chemical and surgical mutilation to healthy bodies. There's a lot to take in here, and I've already tortured myself enough by even attempting to keep up with all of this insanity snowballing further out of control every year. So I'm just going to play portions of Chase Strangio's diatribe and jump in with some clarification when needed.
In a major development in the ongoing attacks on the lives of transgender people in the United States, Alabama has become the first state in the nation to pass a law to make it a felony to provide gender-affirming medical care to trans youth. The law went into effect May 8th. The law aims to ban the use of puberty blockers and hormones, which can be life-saving for trans children and teens.
Amy says that puberty blockers can be life-saving for trans children and teens. This is just pure bullshit.
Doctors and others who are found in violation of the law could face up to 10 years in prison in Alabama.
Yes, doctors who pledge to do no harm then proceed to chemically castrate and drug confused kids should face jail time.
One of the co-authors of the report, Meredith McNamara of the Yale School of Medicine and Child Study Center, said, quote, "We need to call for fact-based checks on legal opinions and legislation. Scientists need to have a seat at the table, and perhaps most importantly, there must be a penalty for writing fake science into law."
I agree, 100%, just not in the way she thinks.
This is so important that we have accountability, that we have fact checks.
Yes, like jail for doctors harming children with surgical and chemical castration and checking the fact that drugging kids with irreversible and unnecessary puberty blockers is in any way life-saving or health care.
And it is true that these laws are codifying complete misinformation and outright lies about this care. And the reality is that this care is safe, this care is effective, this is safe medical care that we have used for decades. This is effective medical care that we know to save the lives of adolescents.
Chase keeps repeating herself here, but no matter how many times she does, chemical castration is not safe, it's not effective, it's not medical care, and it does not save lives.
It is already incredibly difficult to access. There are long waiting lines, and it is treatment that is well studied, it is well provided, and it has documented benefits for these young people.
False, 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 and false.
The reality is that it's not about protecting children. It's not about protecting anyone. It's about surveilling and criminalizing trans bodies and making this medical care increasingly out of reach because we're continuing to see the propagation of this misinformation about what this care actually is.
And as far as out of reach, no sane person wants these drugs within reach of healthy people precisely because it does nothing but harm healthy bodies and minds that could be treated with therapy and genuine compassion for their suffering and confusion.
The reality is that the animating goal behind all of these pieces of legislation is to control people's bodies, to enforce codes and norms of gender and sexuality that entrench power in the hands of the state, that enforce a heterosexual Christian nuclear family as the only model.
There's a lot of bullshit there, but no one is trying to make a hetero-Christian nuclear family as the only family model. There are only people with common sense that recognize the truth about a nuclear family being optimal for the upbringing of kids, be it Christian or not.
So if we don't connect these things, we are ultimately going to see the erosion of all of our rights.
The erosion of all our rights. This is just more bullshit here. I'm not even going to entertain this part.
And you have some people focusing on the fact that on occasion we recognize that some people who are not women become pregnant.
False. Only women become pregnant.
We may use the language of pregnant people. We may use the language of birthing people.
You can use the language if you want. It's still a fact that only women can become pregnant.
That is just a fact.
This is just a fact. No, it's not. It's pure bullshit.
And the reality is women are people, by the way.
By the way? What the fuck? Who's claiming women aren't people besides no one anywhere? What the hell point is she even trying to make here?
And people may become pregnant who are not women.
No, they may not. No matter how many times you say they may. This is just ridiculous at this point.
That we acknowledge reality on occasion to, hold space for people like me who are not women who may become pregnant. That's just a factual truth. It allows people to have more access to care.
Factual truth. First, no one says factual truth who is stating a fact or telling the truth because there isn't any other kind of fact besides one that's true or any other kind of truth besides one that's a fact. Nothing she just said there was a factual truth, just more bullshit.
This harms all of us and we all have a role to play in fighting back.
On that, we agree. This insanity does harm all of us. It harms men, it harms women, and it especially harms children. This is the whole reason I'm doing this episode in the first place, because of the harm all this insanity is doing to all of us. You know, I find listening to people like her painful and unpleasant, and I don't enjoy putting myself through all this, but the protection of men, women, and children is far too important to me. And I cannot in good conscience just sit on the sidelines while lunatics like her propagate harmful lies to innocent, lonely, and confused people. These activists use phrases like gender-affirming care and life-saving medication when referring to experimental and unnecessary drugs and surgical procedures that don't treat any disease or cure any verifiable illness like cancers or tumors.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor at all.
Besides, if it's medicine or medical care, what is the person sick with or dying from? How was it diagnosed and confirmed? And what about the evidence revealing that people who identify as trans are more suicidal, not less, 7 to 10 years after affirmation, after beginning their so-called transition? It isn't obvious to me that a process that makes someone more likely to commit suicide is life-saving or care by any stretch. In fact, it sounds to me like the exact opposite of life-saving care. And as if sex wasn't already confusing enough for young people, genuinely caring for someone often means telling them no, flat out, regardless of how they feel about it. See, good parents understand this, and the proof of it is, if they didn't, you'd see families having ice cream for breakfast, putting back the groceries to spend the food budget at like Chuck E. Cheese, staying up and partying like it's 1999 every school night, and maybe even straight up skipping school because I'm bored and I just don't feel like it. And even between adults, we tell our friends and loved ones, no, that would not be good for you. No, you've had enough to drink. No, you shouldn't drive in your condition, and things like that. No is a big part of caring for our loved ones. How does it make any sense that, for example, a patient flat out tells the doctor, just straight up insist, demand, without fear of consequence, what the diagnosis must be, and then the doctor do something as insane and unhelpful as affirm it without question, or else. And again, keep in mind that it's the kids that are always the ones in these stories who have committed no crime, done nothing wrong, but will suffer the most in the end. And as far as banning books goes, no one is banning books of any kind anywhere in this country. The proof of it is you can find any book allegedly banned on bookshelves in thousands of bookstores and online, currently in print and still very much available for purchase. What I think the people crying book ban are referring to is the effort from sane parents and people who don't want pornographic material available in their kids' schools. This is not only common sense to want, but keep in mind that over 99.9% of all books ever published are not available in your kids' elementary, middle, or high school. It's never been a big deal that sexually explicit books were not available in public schools, and it shouldn't be now. These people just don't want opinions that differ from their own to be heard. They want those opinions and lived experience silenced, shut down, and even punished. For example, detransitioners, or people who identify or once identified as trans and now speak out against turning healthy kids into permanent patients of an ideology that cares nothing for their well-being. And one more note on this for all the bookworms watching and listening. Author Douglas Murray wrote an entire chapter, chapter 4, simply titled Trans, in his book The Madness of Crowds. I highly recommend this book in general, and that chapter in particular, for better understanding of the trans phenomena. In this chapter, Douglas writes, "Every age before this one has performed or permitted acts that to us are morally stupefying. So unless we have any reason to think that we are more reasonable, morally better, or wiser than at any other time in the past, is it reasonable to assume there will be some things that we are presently doing, possibly while flushed with moral virtue, that our descendants will whistle through their teeth at and say, 'What the hell were they thinking?' Is it worth wondering what the blind spots of our age might be? What might we be doing that will be regarded by succeeding generations in the same way we now look on the slave trade or using Victorian children as chimney sweeps?" The answer is this, all of this. Allowing anyone to believe that trans is anything but people pretending to be something they're most certainly and verifiably not, or a person who is genuinely sick and confused and in need of compassion and therapy. This is what we're doing that the future generations will look back on and think, how in the hijacked rainbow flag fuckery didn't they see that not rejecting all of this would produce anything but negative consequences? Precisely, no one should feel afraid or guilty about being strongly opposed to accepting another person's make-believe delusions. And I genuinely feel for people who are afraid to speak their honest feelings about all of this, even guilted for simply having feelings about this that don't stick to the cards or go along with the message. But we do feel afraid and guilty, and that's the real point. We're too afraid, so many of us, to be upfront and truthful because the consequences for speaking the truth these days include, but are not limited to, loss of employment and income.
You're fired. Everybody's fucking fired.
Reputation destruction, social suicide, and doxing and endangerment of one's own family. I'd like to highlight Abigail Schreier here for a moment. She's the author mentioned earlier in the clip from Real Time who Chase Strangio is less than a fan of and would love to see canceled or worse. You may not have heard of her, but if you've only heard of her through the activist grapevines, you're probably picturing an evil witch who hates gays and so-called trans people. But in the name of sanity, let's do something radical and crazy here and listen to her in her own words.
Transgender adults are some of the nicest, soberest, and kindest people I have met in my work as a journalist. And they are leading admirable and productive lives. They have absolutely no desire to harm women or to push transition en masse on children. The activists do not represent them. We must clearly distinguish, for instance, between transgender Americans, many of whom are wonderful, and an ideological movement which seeks to warp our children, families.
Wow. What an absolute monster, huh? Just unbelievable. I wonder what other dark and intolerant thoughts she's expressed.
Social media, we got to get the kids off the social media. This is just so obvious. I know it's hard, but you're talking about skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm, attempted suicide, younger than we've ever seen before. The stakes are just too high.
Holy hateful horror, Batman. I can totally see why the activists want her silenced. Now, if you're not too squeamish and can manage to stomach it, let's watch one last clip from this scary lady whose book should actually be banned according to Chase Strangio.
In America, we have a real weakness for the idea that you can be anything, even if you want the opposite sex. Now, of course, you can present as the opposite sex, but we've actually completely swallowed the lie that you can become the opposite sex.
Seriously speaking, what is it about the questions she asks and the statements she makes that makes these activists so uncomfortable exactly? I honestly believe, and this is so sad, the answer is the truth. She utters too much truth and makes too much common sense for their inclusive, compassionate, and tolerant asses.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, discovered this as well on more than one occasion when she committed the crime of daring to come to the defense of women. You know, the people that Chase Strangio informed us are people, by the way, because we weren't really sure until Chase educated us. Let's take a look, shall we, at a couple of Twitter storms that J.K. created not that long ago. This first one, ending with the hashtag #LetWomenSpeak, reads as follows. Quote, if you think physical intimidation, assault, targeting opponents' employers, and sending women death and rape threats are acceptable as long as it's your side doing it, you support those things, full stop. If you think history will be kind to you, think again, end quote. And this next still from a piece titled J.K. Rowling defends girl driven out of school for questioning trans ideology, published by the Times UK and retweeted by Rowling, that reads, quote, utterly shameful. Add this to the tottering pile of evidence that people in education and academia who are supposed to have a duty of care towards the young have succumbed to an outbreak of quasi-religious fanaticism. The girl's crime? Saying sex exists, end quote. I also learned that apparently one member of the Harry Potter cast had come forward in defense of Rowling, a young lady by the name of Ivana Lynch. And I want to share with you what she posted on September 6th, 2020 in support of JK because I think it's really important. I'm not going to read them because they're kind of long and I'm kind of tired at this point, but feel free to screenshot them and read them for yourself. And like I mentioned before, there are more and more people speaking out against the alphabet activists and bullies who are not trans-identifying or gay individuals, and many of these people speaking out are not famous and don't necessarily have a large platform. Here is one such young lady I came across on TikTok. Check this out.
The fact that the question of what is a woman has to be asked in this day and age is completely insane to me. And then a lot of women have the nerve to sit there and support stuff like this. And the same people that are sitting here trying to call out a definition of what a woman should be or what they believe a woman is are the same ones who support crap like this.
Yeah, I'm feeling excellent. That was sweet, huh? Did you like that? Yeah! And I want to tell everyone else, I'm coming in this tournament. Every woman in this tournament better look out. I'm freaking coming.
Heck to the no. That is not a woman. That is a man.
One particular organization I've come across who does great work standing up to the butchers, liars, and bullies is called Gays Against Groomers. They are a coalition of gays against the sexualization, indoctrination, and medicalization of children. Their content, I assure you, is worth your time. They remind me of Libs of TikTok, a publication run by Shia Rychik, who painted a rainbow target on the back of her head by simply reposting unedited posts made public by other people. She, like many others, simply committed the crime of noticing and then sharing what she noticed. We used to call this journalism. Let's move on to a clip of an internet personality who goes by the name Posey Parker. You may have heard of her. Just getting right to it, here's a clip that went kind of viral of an interaction between her and a man demanding access to the women's changing facilities. Let's take another look at our world today.
On the basis of the comfort, on the basis of the comfort and dignity of girls and women, I'm asking you, telling you, please do not use women's spaces. Makes them feel uncomfortable.
My girls and the other women I am with are very comfortable with me in the bathroom.
Well, fortunately, I'm not your daughter, and my daughter is also not your daughter.
No, that's right.
And she would feel, she would feel very uncomfortable. No, you interrupted me.
Excuse me.
You interrupted me.
I'm not here for a debate. Beth, do you mind?
Right.
I would ask you to please call off your dog.
I beg your pardon. I'm asking you as a mother, do not use female spaces.
And I'm very uncomfortable.
It makes women and girls feel very uncomfortable.
As a mother,
You are not, how dare you?
As a mother, I am very...
You're not a mother. You'll never birth your children. You're not a mother, Dawn.
Now, obviously, that clip doesn't give all the facts or all the context, but I ask you, honestly, which party here seems to be behaving and speaking reasonably, and which party sounds crazy here? That is pure narcissism at work, by the way, Don. And I don't believe anyone with any sense is fooled and believes your intentions to be pure and good. You just seem like a creep. And since I've already spent the entire episode flirting with cancellation by being reasonable and making lots of sense, let's just go all the way to hell. There's another clip that went pretty viral in 2022. I'll just go ahead and play it so that I can stop talking for a moment, and then I'll discuss it a little.
You said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist
I'm
is
denying
dangerous.
that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So you are
pregnant.
denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're
they're
told
allowed
that
to
they're
question.
opening up people to violence?
We have a good
by
time in my
questioning?
class. You should join.
Oh, I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot
I
just in this
know,
exchange.
absolutely.
Extraordinary.
It's so painful. This whole thing, it's so painful. The smugness, the crazy eyes, the refusal to answer questions, the crazy eyes, the derailing of the conversation by way of accusations of so-called transphobia. Did I mention the crazy eyes? The fake and forced laughter, the allegations of opening trans people to violence, playing the attempted suicide card. She's all over the place. The straw man supposedly denying that trans people exist, the cliche, so you're saying, or more precisely in this case, so you're denying, and the condescending, thank you. She asked if he believed men can get pregnant, to which he responded no, because obviously they can't, and she interpreted that as denying that trans people exist. Calling a lie or saying that something false is false used to be called stating the truth, and putting words in people's mouths, misquoting them, and using straw man arguments are nothing but harmful to the resolution of any problem. Obviously, there are people who exist who believe, but probably more accurately demand you accept the lie that men can get pregnant, which they can't. No one is denying those people exist. They clearly exist. However, that's not evidence that men can get pregnant because they can't. Moving on. Here's a clip of another not famous woman I came across in one of my many masochistic moments. She explains quite brilliantly why she disagrees with the idea that men who identify as trans women but are men should be treated legally as women.
Tell me why you're strongly disagreeing.
Because I'm a molecular geneticist. Being male or being female is a developmental process. You can't go backwards. Okay. So you can't change your sex. Like, you cannot do that. The truth is that currently in California prisons and prisons in other parts of the country, women are getting impregnated by other women. You cannot house female prisoners with male prisoners because they get raped. I go to the women's changing room at my gym, and there's a dude in there. He's putting on makeup and hoop earrings. And this is not something a woman does when she goes to work out. Nor do women beat each other to death, but men do.
Oh yeah, we're going all the way there. Another content creator who I enjoy tuning into is Sydney Watson, who said all of this about the gender ideology madness.
Why even have a women's march if gender doesn't exist anyway? In an interview, one of the organizers said that not every woman has a vagina, and not every person who has a vagina. Criminals can identify as women and change to female-only prisons. Why should women assume responsibility for male crimes? The 2016 Dear College letter that changed the Title IX definition of sex here in the United States to include transgender individuals let biological males take educational opportunities, leadership roles, and athletic awards that the law was supposed to secure for women. Female hygiene products, such as Always, removed the female symbol from its packaging as a sign of inclusion. A transgender model in the UK headed a period campaign in 2018 showing that all kinds of people get periods. In 2018, a banking boss who sometimes wears a wig to work was named among the top 100 women in. When we say that being a woman is more than biology, that it's this immutable thing that we can't quite put our finger on, we're told that it, in fact, can extend to anyone. When we disagree with that, we're called transphobic. When we say that our chromosomes and our anatomy also defines us.
Yep, this is our world. I genuinely meant everything I said in my previous episodes about gratitude and all the things I'm grateful for in my imperfect, unsane first world existence, but sometimes I really start to wonder what in the stuffed crust hell is wrong with us. Also, biological males, men. No one should be made to feel guilty about calling men men or properly using the word male. I can't understand the need for and use of the term biological male. Stop it. You sound ridiculous. Grow up. Like, what other types of males are there? Metaphorical males? Unintentional males? Metaphysical males? These are actually the kinds of things we have to process here and now. And speaking of here and now is where we begin to wrap up this fun little episode about LGBTQ activists and social contagion that hasn't been a migraine to work on at all. Let's begin our home stretch with a clip featuring a woman named Scott King Nugent, who I first heard of while watching the controversial documentary titled What is a Woman by my pal, Matt Walsh, who I just canceled earlier this episode. Brace yourselves.
I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male through synthetic hormones and surgery. I will never be a man. Is it transphobic for me to tell the truth? Why is it that a couple hundred years from now, if you dug up my body, they're gonna go, yeah, that was a woman, had babies?
Can you tell me about the procedures that you had?
I've had 7 surgeries. I've had 1 stress heart attack. I've had a helicopter life ride with a pulmonary embolism. I've had 17 rounds of antibiotics. I had 6 inches of hair on the inside of my urethra for 17 months. Nobody would help me, including the doctor that did this to me because I lost my insurance. I get infections every 3 to 4 months. I'm probably not gonna live very long.
Was there any real discussion of the risks and the side effects and?
No, there's not. And I know that people want to think that there is, but there's not.
And I don't care what your politics are, whether you want to expose the far right, whether you want to own the libtards, or just better understand detransitioners and other voices frequently shut down by gender activists, I highly recommend watching this movie. There is one part of the movie in particular that I genuinely enjoyed because it features the opinions and thoughts of people far outside of our modern Western thinking, namely the Maasai tribe in Kenya. Now keep in mind, they've never even heard of Matt Walsh or the Daily Wire, so they don't know that he's actually the devil in flannel and the Dark Lord of the notorious SBG. They just know that they're actually being asked the questions that they're being asked, and their reaction is priceless. Watch.
Can a man become a woman?
No.
No?
No.
What about a transgender? Transgender?
No.
No?
It look like if you want to become a lady but you're a man, you have something wrong in your mind. Something wrong in your family, something wrong in you.
What about if someone was non-binary?
Come again?
Non-binary? Do you know, like non, like someone is
you're not a woman, you're not a man.
Yeah, someone is neither. There's something else. Is that?
Ideguro amana yi kidemay na yole peria gwan topis. He's saying we have never seen things like those. For a man, he has a penis. For a woman, he has a vagina.
What if it's a woman with a penis?
Both.
People are laughing. Is that a dumb question?
Now, are they transphobic? Is that reaction transphobic? Or is it maybe that this is actually the correct reaction to all of this, and we're all just so warped and afraid to have the correct reaction to anything anymore because it means throwing our entire life on the chopping block, and that we're forced to walk on eggshells with our every word?
And that's all I have to say about that.
In closing, I'd like to share my own account of being personally unfriended and canceled over my thoughts and feelings about all this madness. See, around the time I originally planned to put together this episode, before I took a much needed break to dedicate myself to my family, my job, and my health, I posted a few things that a good friend of mine and fellow music collaborator fiercely disagreed with. The first was a clip of one of my personal heroes, Fred Rogers, or Mr. Rogers as you might know him, singing one of his most famous songs titled Everybody's Fancy, and it goes a little something like this.
Boys are boys from the beginning. If you were born a boy, you stay a boy. Girls are girls right from the start. If you were born a girl, you stay a girl and grow up to be a lady. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. Only girls can be the mommies. Only boys can be the daddies. Yes, sir. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. I think you're a special person.
To which he commented the following.
Yes, sir. Everybody's fancy. Everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. I think you're a special person.
That's right, I brought receipts. But because I'm not an asshole, I've decided to hide his name, and I'll simply state that I understand his reasoning and objections. You see, he had recently married the love of his life who went by her birth name, which I won't share because this isn't about any sort of revenge or an attempt to own anyone, simply an attempt to get to the bottom of a very complicated and serious issue. But later on, this lovely lady decided to change her name and identify as trans, which of course means that he stands with her no matter what. And I can respect that, I really can. I just can't change my beliefs over it. So I decided to respond with dignity and kindness, even to suggest we switch topics and that I'd like to hear his thoughts on the new song that I had just dropped titled Without You. He commented again on another post of mine featuring a clip of Douglas Murray, who I mentioned earlier in this episode, stating some concerns regarding the trans issue. To which he replied that he's absolutely shaking at the opportunity to debate me about this one of these days, which I'd very much be okay with. As I stated before, I can take criticism and hard questioning just fine. I even welcome it. We exchanged a few more back and forths here and there about low-level controversial topics, including his emotionally charged distaste towards my sharing of news of a movie you may have heard of titled The Sound of Freedom, which is a movie about the life and career of Tim Ballard, a former U.S. government agent who embarks on a mission to rescue children from sex traffickers in Colombia via his organization called Operation Underground Railroad, as well as another post of mine after the passing of Sinead O'Connor that simply stated, I know nothing about Sinead O'Connor. That is all. Smiling wave emoji. To which a few of my friends replied, including him, with the following comment that you can read for yourself. And I was probably a little bit peeved at his mean-spirited comments by this point, and admittedly was probably a little bit antagonistic here when I replied to his brief bio of Sinead O'Connor with a comment that goes, so she was a badass immigrant songwriter artist who wasn't afraid to stir the pot and call out, for example, pt.3 and fans of the playground, no matter who she offended or what price she had to pay for speaking the truth. I can't put my finger on who she reminds me of, but yes, she's awesome. To which he delivered this long-winded reply that I'll let you read for yourself, in which he demands that I not bring Sinead O'Connor into my web of QAnon, and concludes by asking, "You jerk off to The Sound of Freedom yet?" Which is kind of a bizarre movie to jerk off to given its delicate subject matter. The only type of people I could ever imagine would rub one out to The Sound of Freedom would be the very fans of The Playground and P3D0S's I had mentioned in my comment. Because different strokes for different folks, I guess. And then I replied with this, if you're interested in reading. And then he replies with this, if you're interested in reading some more. Then finally came the straw that broke the camel's back, in the form of me sharing what I thought was a tragic and heartbreaking story that I thought was worth mentioning. To quote the post, "A self-described transsexual male who had gender-affirming surgery in 2009 has experienced such constant pain that he asked Canada's MAID, which is Medical Assistance in Dying, program for permission to be euthanized, and was rejected." I shared this story that was reported on by several news outlets, including my close personal friend Matt Walsh, whose Facebook feed I shared it from. Now, should it matter whose feed I shared it from? Shouldn't the victim and the story itself matter more than which grapevine I heard it from? Apparently not to my amigo of 20 years. His response to me committing the crime of noticing a true and verifiable story, adding only the captions, "Only in America 2023, then sharing it, was as follows. "This is the last straw, dude. You are too far gone if you're sharing Matt Walsh's out of context BS now. It's unfortunate. I hope you jump off the hate train and get informed real quick before you lash out at someone at a PTA meeting or in public just for existing. Fuck Matt Walsh and fuck anyone who listens to his hate. Small-minded individuals. Peace for good, Holmes." Which was disappointing but not bothersome, and to which I replied, "Best wishes to you. And if I were too far gone, I'd be writing to you as disrespectfully and with as much emotional charge as you do to me. But I don't, and I haven't. You can read our recent exchanges back and see for yourself who is too far gone. Take care." And this is the kind of middle school level drama that emerges from simply standing up for men, women, and especially children who are unquestionably harmed by the hijacked pride movement that used to belong to gays, which was great, and gender ideology. Because you see, as I stated in the beginning, I have nothing but compassion for people in pain who are suffering unnecessarily. My heart breaks for people who are mentally and clinically ill, sexually confused for whatever reason, whether it's due to negligent parenting from an Oedipal or devouring mother, an absent or tyrannical father, a combination of both, people who are poorly socialized, people who are genuinely lonely and in need of connection with others, and especially those who have experienced emotional, psychological, physical, and or sexual abuse, whether as children or adults. I have nothing against gays. I'm all for gays being gay and not being told that there's something wrong with them or that they were born in the wrong body, or being lied to and confused with non-binary nonsense and permanently and irreparably damaged by chemical and or surgical butchery at the hands of those who took an oath to do no harm. And I have nothing against mentally and sexually confused victims of neglect and or abuse. Never have, never will. But I will always and forever call a dangerous lie exactly what it is, a dangerous lie. And to all the loving parents who are doing their best to protect their children from liars, manipulators, and tricky people who would dare and try to keep secrets between them and your kids, my heart genuinely goes out to you, and I wish you the best. I've recommended before, and I'll recommend again, if you're a parent and you haven't yet read Gavin de Becker's book titled Protecting the Gift, Keeping Children and Teenagers Safe and Parents Sane, you need to make that one next on your to-read list. And now that I've probably been unfriended and canceled by the remaining modern leftist friends I had left, I'd like to conclude this episode with a very special thank you to a very good friend of mine who has been in my life since we were children. Her reply to my birthday wishes to her that same year really gave me strength and affirmed what I already knew in my heart to be true, but maybe needed to hear from someone who has nothing to gain by being and remaining in my life. I wrote, "Happy birthday. Thanks for still being the buddy of a reprehensible monster like me." Smiley face emoji. To which she made my entire month by replying, "Thanks, and you need to give yourself a lot more credit than a reprehensible monster. You are one of the sweetest, most loyal, and intelligent people I know. The people that don't see that, fuck them." So in case you forgot, and in case I failed to express how much that meant to me, you know who you are. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your friendship over the years, and I look forward to our families getting together soon. And that does it for episode 25 of The Study. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Talk to you all again soon. Have a great day.